Hi everyone, Aiden here with etrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at, and later we'll be showing you how to install this Demco Premier Series above bed rail kit on our 2015 Ram 1500. So what this is going to do is give you a set of rails, the industry standard rails that you can drop your fifth wheels into. Our neighbor today, this is a new truck to him that he just got, and he already had a fifth wheel from his previous truck. So what do? Well, you get a rail kit and now you can drop in your fifth wheel. So whether you're getting one new from Demco or CURT or B&W, or you already have one, this could give you a way to mount that up. So this custom installation kit is going to give you a number of things to make the installation a bit smoother on your Ram. Above the bed here, we've got spacers that will match up into the ridges of your truck bed. And down below, we've got custom brackets that will line up with those and basically give us places to mount to the frame and allow us to attach this securely to the truck. Now, something to know with those brackets though is once they get down to the frame, they're not really going to utilize anything pre-existing. You're going to have to drill a lot of holes into the frame of your truck. And what that means is it's going to be time consuming and it's going to take quite a bit of effort. So what I would suggest is if you're getting into this, be prepared. Have all the tools you need, maybe grab a friend or two, and just be ready to sit down with it and go through the install process and be working on it until it's done. But the important thing you're wondering is, how does it install? And we're going to walk you through that process so you can see what it looks like on your Ram 1500 right now. Now, starting off your installation, it might look a little bit different for you whether or not you have a drop-in bed liner. For us today, we do. So what we're going to do is roughly mark out where these rails are going to sit, make some paint marks on our drop-in bed liner where we can trim around them, and give ourselves a little bit of leeway since these don't always sit perfectly flush. That way we know where we want to trim and have this eventually drop back in. Once we get all that roughly marked out, we'll want to get the bed liner out of here to actually start the install. And if you don't have a drop-in bed liner at all, you can pretty much just ignore this part and carry on with the install as normal. So what we need to do is get this rear bar, this rear rail, and measure from the end of our bed out for our short bed, 28¼ inches. So that measurement is going to be from the rear of the bed to the rear of this rail here. So once I have it roughly in position, I'm just going to get the tape measure on one side, get it a little bit more precise, and then shift it over to the other side and get that side a bit more precise too before I make my marks. When you have your positioning where you like it, then you can go ahead and make your marks. And again, this is just going to serve as a rough estimate. We're going to cut to the outside of those lines whenever we do trim this bed liner because we want a little bit of wiggle room so this can settle in as we'd like. With the front one marked out, we can drop our fifth wheel into position, and that'll basically determine where the front rail goes. So drop that in, make sure that we didn't come out of alignment on the front side here, and then you can take that paint pen and mark out along that front rail. When you've made all the markings you need on your drop-in bed liner, you can take this out, take the bed liner out, and repeat all those steps we just did, only this time on the bed. So if you didn't have that drop-in liner, this is the part where you'd pick up. Now once the bed liner's out, the process will look a little bit different because we have these spacers that we need to install. Now you're going to have these shorter, thick bolts in your kit, and you want to apply a little bit of blue Loctite on them, which is provided. So we'll just run a bead kind of along the threads there. And that spacer will live under this spot right here, the second hole from the end down through. And we'll do that on both sides. Then you'll want to torque these down to the specifications in your instructions. Do this while trying to keep these square, so apply a fair amount of pressure down and maybe even grab an extra set of hands or feet to stand on the rail on the other side to help keep it still. You can always come back through and check to see if it's square. Ours isn't looking super great right now, so I'm going to actually loosen it up and try to push this back into a better alignment and apply a bit more pressure down here. Now we can do what we did earlier and measure from the end of our bed to the end of the rail here on both sides to make sure it's square and spaced properly. With this in position, all measured out properly, I'm going to do the same thing we did on the bed liner side and mark this out so we have the positioning for our rails in case things shift around before we're fully bolted in. Then we can drop our fifth wheel into both rails and put our pins in so we can get it to sit as true as possible. And when you drop it in, just make sure that nothing came out of alignment with our holes, or not our holes, our markings up front. Once everything's pinned in, just do the same thing we did on the rear and mark out where our rail is sitting on the front. So now we're ready to start drilling after we've double checked and triple checked that all of our measurements are correct. So grab yourself a big drill bit and you can use this to find the center of these holes, and then we'll use that center to drill our pilot hole. Now on the rear, closest to the tailgate, we've got two holes that we're going to be drilling on either side, here and here on our spacer blocks. And then on the front side, closest to the cab, we're going to be going through this second from the outside square hole that we used our spacer blocks on the rear with. So when you're doing this, stand on here to keep it from moving and just mark out your center. And when you're doing this, just choose the drill bit that's going to be as big as possible that fits that hole the best so that it's going to be a better center for our pilot hole eventually. With all the locations marked, start with a small drill bit and get your pilot hole going. Now as you're doing that, don't just send it all the way. Maybe be a little bit gentle so we can check for any clearance issues underneath. Now with all the pilot holes drilled out up top, we're going to leave it be for now. At this point, you would jack up the rear of your vehicle to get the tires off the ground. We've got ours up on our lift, and we're going to get the wheels off to give ourselves more room to work. Once the wheel's off, we need to get the fender liner out. And that's going to consist of 9 screws that you'll take out with an 8mm socket and 1 lone Phillips head screw. All those screws will be located kind of up and around the wheel well and some back here. And then that lone Phillips head will be on the mud flap. So I'm going to take that out first. With all the screws removed, this should just pop out. So we'll start from the corner away from our mud flap and just work our way around. Now the mud flap will stay behind because there's one final screw holding it in place. You don't need to worry about it, but that's why it's not coming off. Now we're ready to start test fitting our brackets and getting them into position underneath. We're going to be doing this and showing it on the driver's side because we've got a lot of obstructions in our way and we want to show you how to get those out of your way. The passenger side is going to be a little bit more clear, but follows the same process in a mirror image. So first things first, this bundle of wires here needs to come out. So there's going to be a series of plastic clips holding those in. Pop those out with something like a trim panel tool. Since our truck's a bit older, those plastic clips actually broke on us, so that's something to be aware of. And we're going to have to relocate that factory ground. Moving on over though, by our shock, there's going to be this brace, and there's a bolt up here that uses that same 10mm socket we had earlier, and we're going to take this out to move this brace out of our way. It just connects to the fender. Now, in addition to that, there's a small bundle of wires kind of tucked behind that brace, Same deal, undo those clips, 2 in total, and just kind of get those out of your way. This biggest bracket is going to go towards the cab end of your truck. In this one, there is a trick to getting it in, so locate that top slotted hole and insert it that way. So we'll take it up to where that brace once was, push it out of our way, and once it's in there, just rotate it, get that brace brought back around where it'll eventually get reattached, and get this lined up as best we can with that hole, that pilot hole in our bed that we did. Now, if that hole isn't lining up, that means up top we'll need to make some adjustments on ours. Our hole is a bit too far forward, and it's not quite lining up with the bracket here, so we'll need to adjust for that up top. The smallest bracket is for the middle location. All of them will be labeled driver and passenger as well, so just watch out for that so you know which one's which. And this one will go up right behind the coil spring here. And that bundle of wires will need to kind of get pushed back in there. This one's maybe a bit hard to see, but in that slotted hole up there, our pilot hole is lining up, so we're good on this bracket. And before we check that last bracket location, I need to move this factory ground. And the fun part is now that stud needs to go, so we're going to grind it off. And with that stud out of the way, we can check for fitment. Again, this is one of those ones where it's hard to see, but it is lining up. So I'm going to come up behind and just cover that bare metal up with some paint or something, and then we'll relocate that factory ground, making sure to maybe grind some of this off so we get a clean connection. Once you've verified that all of the holes are lining up for you, that's when you can safely go back up to the top and enlarge the holes to the specs and the instructions, knowing that everything's aligned properly. We'll step up from our pilot holes using a 1/2-inch drill bit and drill to our final size using a step bit. Once we switch to the step bit though, we're just going to make sure we check frequently with our hardware to make sure we don't drill it out too large. Once you've verified that the hole spacing is correct, just do that for the remaining mounting holes. Again, 2 on each side towards the tailgate and 1 towards the cab of the truck. And we'll come back through and cover up that bare metal. Now we just need to drop our hardware down through. The cab end of the truck here is going to be the most complicated, which, saying that, it's not really that complicated, it just has more pieces. So there's these spacer shims with that U-shaped cutout that'll go down kind of in the ridge. So if you need to, maybe lift up a bit, get that to line up. This bushing will sit on top of that shim, and that should be able to slide in through the end here. And take these longer lag bolts, drop those down through all the spacers and through the hole we just drilled out in the rear, or in the front rather. We'll move to the tailgate end now. At the tailgate end, it's just these 2-inch bolts here that'll drop down through the spacer we installed at the very beginning of this process. 2 for each side, and repeat all that over on the other side of the vehicle. With all our hardware passed down through the bed and poking out the bottom, we need to attach our brackets. Now, this is going to be really helpful if you have an extra set of hands that can twist the bolt from up top while you just hold the flange nut from the bottom. And we're going to start from the rearmost bracket and work our way to the front. So this one's probably going to be our easiest one, and that'll go towards the bolt that's poking down towards the rear the most. I'm going to hop around the other side so I can actually get my hand in there a bit better. And I'll do my best to make this easy for you guys to see. Pass that up through. I'll hold the nut in place, and Joe's up top. He can start to thread the bolt while I just hold it in, and for the harder to reach ones, I'll hold that nut with my wrench. All right, and once it's snug, we'll just repeat that process for the other 2 bracket locations. Now our brackets are firmly in place. That hardware in the bed is snug down, so this bracket is going to act as a template now to drill out the holes in our frame. And we'll use a similar technique where we take our final drill bit size, the 17/32, put that in, and use it to mark our center. And then we'll come back through with a smaller pilot bit, and then eventually enlarge it up to this final size. We can then take the hardware for our brackets and the fish wire included in our kit. That fish wire is going to feed in through the hole we just drilled out and out through an access hole in our frame somewhere. So I'm going to aim for right here. When that pull wire is through, thread on your bolt, and we'll pull it back through the frame and out through that hole we just drilled. Carefully unthread it because they only give you the 1 pull wire, but also be careful to not push that bolt back into your frame. If you do, you better have a magnet handy to help fish it back out, and we'll put that flange nut on to secure it. And as we're tightening this down, of course, just leaving it hand tight, maybe zap it down a little bit, but not finally torquing it down until we have all the remaining ones done. So that process we did with this one will just get repeated for all the remaining brackets. And here's what all of the hardware looks like once it's in. So it's pretty much just 2 nuts and bolts for each of those brackets. The only ones that are a little bit different are these middle ones. Because we can access it from the inside here where our coil spring is, we don't need to fish wire anything. So just be aware that that hardware is going to be a little bit different and the process will be a bit different, but if anything, it's just easier. And really the hardest part is just the drilling. It just takes a long time, but take it slow. And once you've got all of those snugged down by hand, maybe zap them down with an impact or something, we can go up top and torque down the hardware in the bed. Now, just go through and torque all this hardware down. And those specs can be found in your instructions. If you don't have a torque wrench, then you can typically check one out from a local auto parts store. And then we'll follow the same procedure once all the top bolts are torqued for everything on the frame here. Again, reference your instructions for that torque spec. With everything torqued down, you need to take that factory ground and relocate it. I'm going to drill a new hole pretty much right around here. I'll try to keep my hand out of the way for you. Through the frame. So that's going to be my mark. And then I'll drill that out. And then your kit does come with the nut and bolt, but we're going to use a self-tapping screw to secure that ground. And then anything we took off, like that factory brace that we removed a bolt from, put that back together, put your fender wells back together, and put the wheels and tires back on. And that'll do it for our look at and installation of this Demco Premier Series fifth wheel above bed rail kit on our 2015 Ram 1500. Thanks for watching.